Welcome to No Free Lunch, Africa's freshest business and tech podcast with me, your host, Greg Stewart. And as South Africa heads into Women's Month in August, our topic today is a well-timed one, and that is the building of ecosystems within specific industries to support the development of skills and people, and in this case, particularly for women. Ecosystems have been described as primarily connecting people to resources and stakeholders and connecting the dots between people, and also seeing and identifying needs and gaps and then finding ways to address those needs and gaps within specific groups or industries. And today I'm really pleased to have as my guest Paula Hulley, the Managing Director of Digitas, part of South Africa's Publicis Group, and also the commercial lead for Publicis Group Africa. And Paula is also the chair of the IAB South Africa Connected Commerce Committee. That's quite a mouthful. Paula has over 2 decades of experience in brand and digital and agency leadership in South Africa. And welcome to No Free Lunch, Paula.
Thanks so much, Greg. It's fantastic to be here. I'm excited for our discussion.
Yeah, indeed. And I think just to start off with, you've had such a great depth of experience in the advertising and marketing industry, as well as big brands. Just give us a brief outline of what you consider the highlights or in greatest moments in the industry that you've experienced.
Yeah. Amazing. I think, if I just think the top line highlights, it has been quite a journey and quite a long journey, actually, have always been, I think actually in context of this conversation, like the incredible connectors who've joined one part of my career to the next.
Yes.
And it's not like I started off by, this is my career. I want to be the MD of Digitas. I want to be at the French global conglomerate. That wasn't my agenda. I've always sort of what I call follow the energy. Okay. And I've just been super lucky to meet such amazing people. And I think my last highlight was my interview with John T. Fisher, who's the he's now the Chief Strategy Officer of Publicis. Yeah. And we sat down at the table and he was just like, this is the plan. This is how we're going to connect end to end. These are the resources. This is the technology. And I was just like, it was an absolute yes. And I think those are my favorite moments. And I've been lucky enough, whether it was with the Rafales, or at Touchlight Media, or just some amazing people that have been in my life to connect those dots. So I'm sure I could think of tons of moments and some funny ones too, but those are the ones that just stand out for me.
I love those kind of moments because for me as well, I think in the industry, one always remembers the people who have been there, supported, backed you, and also given you opportunity. But let's talk about the advertising industry a bit. It's a tough industry. And I started in the industry long before you did. You can see with the gray hairs. And it's always been considered quite a tough industry. And just recently, there was a recent comment from Charles Stewart, who's the co-founder and CEO of Roger Wilco. And Charles said, advertising has spent years attracting ambitious, creative, intellectually curious people and then rewarding them with unrealistic deadlines, blurred boundaries, and a culture that too often celebrates endurance rather than effectiveness. The result is predictable: burnout, anxiety, disengagement, and ultimately an exodus of experienced people from the industry.
That's a tough one.
I think it's probably a fair comment. And how do you think this has impacted staff development and in particular the development of women in the industry?
So first of all, I love the Roger Wilco work, and yes, I totally respect the opinion. And I think, it's absolutely one of the very important points of view and has to be taken incredibly seriously. I don't think we've seen more around work-life balance. Well, we've never seen more burnout. I think we've never seen more around work-life balance and, health programs coming into our businesses and all the support you can imagine that's accessible. I think what it really does demand of us, and I'm guilty of not always being in the capacity to think in this way, but it's like, I think they said on the airplane where you have to put the mask on yourself first and then you can put it on your child, which I can't imagine doing. Of course, I'd put it on my child first. But I think it is about understanding yourself really well. I mean, when I was at Glue, with Pete Case, we use insight development. Here at Publicis, we use Enneagram. Understanding yourself is fundamentally really important. And I think as AI comes in, I mean, if you're not sure of who you are and how to conduct and access the best resources or support personally, and we can talk about that from a leadership context as well,
Yeah.
I think your risk for burnout is probably like inevitable.
Yeah.
I think you do really need to understand what you need in order to function and thrive in pressure. When you started talking about it, I thought, yes, we are a very special tribe. And actually, I think we get a lot of pride out of,
Yeah.
some of the pressure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's quite serious these days. And I think, well, as always, but even more so. And yeah, looking after yourself and understanding who you are to traverse this landscape, I think is really critical. And hopefully your business that you're in also helps give you the resources, but you have to access them. You can give someone everything in the world. And if they're not accessing it, it's really, it's a tough space to be.
That's a valid point. It's also up to people to access and make use of the opportunities. Nobody's going to just open up a pathway for you and then put you in a pram and push you down the pathway. You got to get up and walk yourself. And I think that's also an important lesson. But let's talk about the ecosystem building discussion that you're keen on developing in the industry. When one talks about ecosystems, I gave a brief rundown of what I see as an ecosystem earlier. But if you talk to 10 people, you're going to get probably 10 different answers. So when you talk about women as ecosystem builders rather than just leaders, what does that look like in practice?
I come from a technical background. So in that space, an ecosystem is literally like all the moving parts that pull something together. At Digitas, we call it the network effect. When everything's connected and healthy, then we're stronger. And I suppose from a personal or leadership point of view, it's not too dissimilar. But I think what I mean by the ecosystem or women who are building those ecosystems is that these days, and we can talk a little bit about tech in a second and how that's becoming more and more relevant and necessary. But in order to get the job done, there's just too many specialists. There's too many people that are required to do it. And so I think that people, women especially, who have a knack for that kind of cooperation typically, but anyone actually who has the ability to connect that ecosystem together more readily. And there's certain personality attributes that I think also go with it. But building those ecosystems and connecting, often that's quite invisible, I think. It's typically what might be happening in the background. And even some of the very prominent leaders, I think, in our country, females, included, who are doing it, even if they're being acknowledged for their leadership role, the kind of traditional leadership role, I don't think a lot is noticed or actually about what it takes to run an ecosystem and to build that foundation in a business. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's really that, that network.
I think the question for me is, if I look at the industry and you hear of individuals doing certain things in the background, as you mentioned, and so on. But there hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't really been something where somebody's actually said, okay, listen, here's a structure. We're going to create a structure that actually manages this, or a system. And my experience in business is that great businesses are built by great systems. So I think my question is, where's the system? Is there somebody? I'm not aware of one. Is there somebody who's creating a system, a structure that can actually drive that within the advertising and marketing industry? And I know, we speak quite a lot to entrepreneurs, and there's a whole network of entrepreneurs out there, and there's a whole bunch of different platforms and structures that are, being quite effective nowadays in helping support entrepreneurs, people who are starting up businesses. And there is a whole ecosystem that's currently being raised around entrepreneurs, something that we really encourage. And a lot of our content is focused on that industry because we believe it's important for the economy. Likewise, in the advertising industry, first of all, is there a structure that you're aware of? You spoke about technology. Technology can often create that kind of structure. And how can that be built, and who should be building it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we definitely have, in our industry, there are a number of different systems and I think models that different companies are using, and it might depend on their size, a corporate or versus a startup, for example. And I think, like you said, the technology is absolutely there. It's chalk and cheese to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And actually that's enabling the system to work a lot faster. I think from an ecosystem of people and all behaviors to run that system in a way that is both cooperative and competitive almost at the same time, I think is where I think leadership is going, and where like certainly personality characteristics or skills that you required will be needed even more. Publicists, if I may be so like biased, biased,
No, not at
to
all.
speak of, has spent the last 10 years building that. So,
Right.
that's the system, it's the technology underneath, it's the accessibility of 110,000 people who
Right.
can pick up the phone or Teams each other and get what we need. And then building that cultural layer, underneath it, so that someone does answer the request on the other side and is willing to cooperate, even if they're not going to win anything from it, because they understand the collective goal we're working towards. And I think, it's really those personalities that the people that I'm really fascinated by are the leaders that are not only contributing to their own system, but they're actually contributing to systems outside of what they're doing, because it means the collective outside of their own KPIs or business goals, I think is really what's going to be needed even more, in terms of where we're going and the type of skills and tech that we're bringing together. So I think, they definitely are systems. They're very exciting systems. They keep changing and growing. So that takes a different type of fitness.
Yes.
I think I was blessed to have a lot of energy growing up, but I think that's a great attribute to have.
Yeah.
And obviously a great team. But I think they definitely are systems, and very exciting space.
Well, it's actually good to hear that there are those kind of systems. But if we talk about a broader discussion around the advertising media industry as a whole, there are already a lot of very successful women in the industry. I was looking through a list of it earlier, and without going through a long list of names,
The whole list.
but South Africa has been quite, I think,
transformative,
at the front of developing women in leadership roles, particularly in the advertising and the media and in the marketing industry. And you look at some of the top marketing positions in the country, a lot of them are filled with very competent, very exciting marketers and talent. So there's already a substantial layer, I would say, of women leadership in the industry. Why do you think there hasn't been a broader ecosystem already established across industries? I get your point of what is happening in politics, but perhaps there's a need to look at something broader, and just have your comments on that.
Yeah. So absolutely, like you say, there's a beautiful list of amazing leaders. And a lot of those leaders I mentioned earlier are at the pinnacle of their career and leading in a traditional sense. And on top of that, they're also sort of moving across systems and platforms and bringing people together. I think one of my favorite things when I was at the IAB was actually putting competitors around a table. Typically leaders have, you can't speak really up to your CC suite. You don't want to tell them you're not sure what to do, and you don't want to tell the people below you that you don't know what to do. So who's best but your peers, and who are they but the competitor brand? So that for me is a great example of working outside systems and pulling expertise together in a very different way. And I think it is absolutely happening. And I think this conversation is so brilliant because it's actually bringing it to light, and even in the discussion, almost fleshing out what it means and what it could mean in the future. So I do think it's happening. I just don't think it's recognized. I think it's such a soft skill, potentially, and people are focused on the outcome, which is also incredibly important. I'm not denying that. But in terms of how some people get there, I think it's really different to how others get there.
Yes.
And while one can be quite quick and demanding potentially, or competitive and make things happen, in my mind, and certainly from what I've read, it's not very sustainable. Right. And so this longer cooperative cross-system planning might take a bit longer, but it's definitely more sustainable. And I think without it, we're not going to solve the kind of problems we need to solve in the future as they become slightly more complex and more technical.
So in developing this, or potentially developing a system of this sort, and I truly hope that you'll be driving this across the industry after our discussion. I'd love to have a side discussion about that with you. But where are the gaps? So you've already spoken about, things that have happened. There's already a lot of female leadership. Where are the gaps?
Yeah. So I'd say one of the gaps I see, and maybe this is more at a grassroots level, and I think maybe for women specifically, it might be like a politeness thing. I'm not sure, but I think often we feel we need to wait, and it can be at any level, at a junior level, senior level. We feel like we need to wait to kind of step into something or wait for the business to craft that moment. And I think one of the gaps is literally giving yourself permission to go and do the thing, participate, and better yet, like contribute. I know sometimes we feel like we don't have the skills, or we're not, good enough, or we hear a lot of, a lot of talks in that area. But actually, it's just about leaning in and contributing. I do think, that's really important. And, it's a game changer. I always say to my peers and my colleagues, like, don't you love that phone call when one of your team phones you up and says, I've been thinking about this problem and this is the solution I've got. Why don't we try it?
Yes.
More of those calls. And even better if I'm phoning my client and I'm going, I know this isn't our remit, but I saw this in your system and I think it could really help to move that forward, or participating in talks like this and think, I just think it's so important to participate.
Yeah.
And then maybe the second gap I think sometimes, and these are more, I suppose, emotional gaps than like practical gaps, but I do think they make a big difference. I think people feel, okay, I'm going to contribute. So what sounds important is innovation, or what sounds important is tech or AI, because that's what everyone's talking about. But if you're not passionate about something, I think something has to make you really angry or really happy, because you're going to have to commit a huge amount of effort to this program or whatever it is that you want to contribute to. And I think one of the gaps is people thinking they have to do something because it sounds important. But I think for me, and I mentioned right from the beginning, like for me, it's about where are you energized? And if you can close that gap for yourself, I think you're really onto something, and it allows you to contribute. And it allows you to be a sustainable role. And we're all worried about our roles, right? Everyone's like, is my job safe? And I think that's even more important. And then probably another gap, again, probably more personal or emotional would be, and I actually heard it in a talk this morning that we hosted, is and I mentioned this, like, do I know myself well enough, like to take on this role, and what tools am I using? Like I mentioned, Enneagram or Insights, or do I have a personal coach? And I know a lot of people talk about mentorship, and these are all important tools to navigate in order to navigate those gaps. And I think if those three things, if anyone was listening to this and they tried those three things, I think already you're going to go one step further to feeling probably more psychologically grounded or psychologically safe. And when we are psychologically safe, then we can innovate. Then we're not in a zero-sum environment where, like, if that person gets that, then I get nothing, and now I'm going to fight you for, like that competitive space. I think we have to figure out ways to become, like, how can I feel cooperative? How can I be generous?
I think that there's a thing for me that is really, really important, and that is helping people build confidence. And you sort of alluded to it in your third thing you raised. But I think for me, it's one of the key things. I work with a bunch of youngsters in our team, and they're great people. But the thing for me is to allow people to grow. In my experience, one of the greatest things you can help them with is to give them confidence in themselves, confidence in the ability to speak, confidence to walk into a room and own it, confidence to ask questions when you need to clarify something. And I think for me, that's a big gap. And it's not just amongst women. I think in general, it is such a great need in the industry. And I'm not sure that there's enough people helping other people build confidence in themselves. And it's certainly what I believe should be part of that mix.
No, I think, spot on. I think when we're not confident, we're not participating and we're not joining in. And then it's just a negative feedback loop, because now I didn't participate, so now I'm left out. Now I don't belong. So I think that psychology is, like, absolutely relevant. And I think that often we feel confidence can come, it's a big sort of concept. And like you mentioned, by helping and creating those moments for people to feel confident, for being seen, acknowledging the success, how do you share learning, how do you share feedback is also important. And then again, for the person, for myself, like in terms of developing my own confidence, or for anyone trying to develop their confidence, we've all seen the memes on Instagram where it's the only way is through. And, like, to develop your confidence, even doing the talks, it's just you need to be there. And by doing it, I think that's where we earn the most confidence, through our
Yes.
own recognition of what we've done. So how do we each give ourselves that opportunity to earn our own confidence, I think is, yeah, something we can hope for ourselves, and our daughters and our granddaughters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's just talk about what in practice has made the biggest difference in developing strong female talent. And I think
Mm.
part of that is also the ability to be okay to have high standards, uh,
Mhm.
be okay to have some tough feedback, and give real responsibility to people. It's amazing how
Mm.
when you give them that responsibility, it actually gives them confidence. And I've seen that now, well, in over decades, but particularly now with this young team of people that I'm working with. We've just had some interns, giving them the opportunity to do things, and even giving them the opportunity to fail and fail okay, and be okay when you're failing, and to learn from
Yes.
that, and have an environment where you go, okay, you failed, you're buying us donuts this week. uh, you know
That's nice. I like that.
and and that's okay, because it makes it all right, rather than failed. And so again, structuring these programs for women, and in general, I think for young people coming up into the industry, being okay with saying, okay, we're going to set high standards, we're going to expect you to deliver, and create an environment where it's okay to give them some tough feedback in a good, positive way, and help them build again their confidence and their knowledge and their skills base, and let them shine.
Yeah.
For me, that for me is one of the most wonderful ways of actually lifting people up.
No, I think you've just described like the trifecta, I think, of great leadership. I think if a leader's doing that, and I think leaders can be at different levels, and we're
Yeah.
all leaders, and we could all think, how am I leading my own life? How am I leading in my role? How am I leading as a collective in another ecosystem? But what you've just described, I think, we can all do more for ourselves and for others. So yeah, absolutely agree.
So,
100%.
so how are we going to go about building this ecosystem, Paula?
I feel like I should have done that research before I came on the call. I think what's typical, typically when one is discussing something, is that it already exists, and I think
Yeah.
it's more about actually putting it down and then having conversations like this to make it simple. So I think it is happening, like we've mentioned. There are a host of leaders, female leaders included, who are doing this every day. And I think it's about, yeah, it's there, I think, and how to reward that, how to make that visible, like talks like this, I think, yeah, is going a long way to make that happen, for sure.
Well, I'm going to challenge you.
Okay.
I'm going to challenge you and Publicis to let's go and
Nice. I
talk
love
to
it.
some of the people out there in the marketplace. Let's go and talk to some of the big corporates, and say to them, hey, we've got this idea for a program where we're going to build this ecosystem, where we're going to help develop and grow
I love it.
young female leaders for the future. And I'm going to lay that down as a challenge to Paula
I love
Hulley.
it.
And I know that she's the kind of person who's going to respond to that.
I am.
And let's do that, because,
Yeah.
often, again, the industry, we get caught up, we are busy, lots of things on our plate on a weekly basis. But
Mm.
if you're going to do something, let's do it. How about that?
Yes. I love it. And I think there are lots of people doing it. So I think we can connect that even at a
Yeah.
larger side, and bring visibility to what they're doing. So I'd love to do that. Thank you.
Well, I think that's the beginning of a beautiful thing that we're gonna sit here in a year's time and go, hey, you know what we've done?
Yes, we will do that. And yeah, I like big projects. So
Yes.
this, yeah, obviously appeals to me in a big way. Thank you for the
Okay.
opportunity.
Well, Paula Hulley, I think you and I could probably sit and chat for hours about the
Are we already
industry.
done?
Yeah, we're at the end of our questions, and
Oh,
yeah, I mean, it's I really think, though, it's a great conversation, and I'm hoping that something is going to come out of this. And I really want to thank you for just being open and sharing your experience
Thanks, Greg.
and what you see in the industry, and let's build something.
I love that. Thank you, Greg. I'm going to give you a call.
Call me.
When you're back, when you're
All
back
right.
home.
All right. Well,
Thanks
thank you
so
for being
much.
on No Free Lunch, Paula Hulley.
A pleasure. Thanks, Greg.